Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is looking at the astrological chart of Amy Winehouse. I just saw the biopic on her, and I have to confess that I'm not well acquainted with her music. I do know a couple of her songs, but also her life story I didn't really know. And this movie doesn't start when she is a little girl. So that to me is very important because you can look at somebody's negative behavior, their addiction, in this case, she supposedly was violent with her partner and other kind of what we would consider to be dysfunctional behaviors and just focus on them. But we really need to go to the root cause if we're really going to look at somebody's life as a whole. So the astrological chart sometimes can give us a window into that. Although I have to say, when I was looking at her chart, I still was very, I don't know, confused because I do believe, because I have done personal readings for people. I know in one case, somebody was surprised that I didn't see trauma in their chart. So it doesn't always play out that way. I think when it's front and center, where I can see it very clearly, that it may be something that throughout the lifespan, the person is always grappling with on one level or another. And if it's not in the chart, it may be that the person was meant to experience certain things, but then they really did not take on those things as part of their identity and things of that nature. So, I do want to make it clear that I honestly believe that our charts are a cosmic blueprint, but I don't believe that they our destiny necessarily. I do believe that we can always change, any kind of circumstances. We might not be able to obliterate them completely, but at least we'll be able to modify them so that they're not destructive for us. An example would be some kind of a genetic health thing that tends to produce certain health conditions within a family lineage. They say that our health conditions, only 4% of them are genetic, so passed on from prior generations. I I think that even with those ones that are genetic, there can be things that the person does to kind of modify things so that it doesn't impact them as negatively as it might if somebody doesn't even do anything. You know what I mean? So anyway, Amy Winehouse was a Virgo, and that's really interesting because Virgo is a mutable earth sign, and Virgo people, first of all, tend not to be theatrical, meaning that they're very, you have an earth sign, they're very grounded, they're very, I would say, nondescript. Now, of course, you have to look at the ascendant to get more of the image of that person, the way that they carry themselves. But I just feel that people who are Virgos, just in and of themselves, not talking about other influences, that they're not going to be that flamboyant. Because if you think about somebody like Amy with her beehive hairdo, with her heavy, Cleopatra eye makeup, the clothes that she wore, these kinds of things show businessy. They're kind of something you'd expect on stage. And maybe she didn't wear them 24/7 anyway. Movies tend to exaggerate and aren't necessarily accurate, but I have a feeling that she probably did not wear clothing that was just like plain old jeans and t-shirts very often. That's just my feeling about it. I could be wrong. And actually, her rising sign was Gemini. So as a rising sign, to me, the one thing that stands out with Gemini rising is being thin, maybe not having to really work at it. Now, because I don't know a lot about her background, I was very curious after the movie to find out a lot of information. And I'm not sure that that's going to be forthcoming because, just the standard facts to me are just, that's just scratching the surface. I think there's something more that went on with her that possibly she took to her grave. I believe that could possibly be true. I also think that she may have a lot of karmic influences that had nothing to do with her upbringing per se. I'll give you an example, is that she said that her father leaving the family, I believe she was 9 years old. I can't remember if it was an off and on again thing, but she said that it made her promiscuous when she was in her early 20s. And the movie alluded to promiscuity, that she was very, I don't know if you would call it hypersexualized or sexual or something like that. Now, apparently she also suffered from bipolar, which I think that can create, when somebody's in a manic phase, they can be hypersexual, and they might not do that throughout their whole existence, just at those times when they are in the manic phase. Now, even with something like bipolar, again, talking about, genetic or something that is in the family lineage, sometimes it does seem like certain mental health conditions, like perhaps bipolar or schizophrenia, dissociative disorder, that they might run in the family. I know that is a definite possibility. However, one of the explanations that I have read about as it pertains to people who are bipolar is that they are, that it's a form of post-traumatic stress disorder. And so that makes total sense with me. I'm totally aligned to that explanation, because they said the same thing with ADD. And really, if you think about it, it totally makes sense, because when you are in a very chaotic environment, for whatever reason that is creating trauma, it totally jumbles your brain. It totally jumbles your emotions. You might be dealing with a parent who is bipolar, or, like even with addictions. I think that bipolarity, manic depression can be associated with addiction. And so the person is self-medicating. And, but anyway, I think her brother said that she was suffering from bulimia. And apparently she was on antidepressants when she was 15 years old. So there was something beyond, other things that are going on that I suspect might have happened. Just because somebody has like a very traumatic experience doesn't mean that they share it with other people. So a common example is sexual abuse. And this could be in the family. This could be, somebody, it could be a stranger, but I would say most likely somebody in the person's life that is not a relative as well. Maybe it's a friend of the family, or just someone who's a teacher or whatever. Those kinds of scenarios, the problem is that sometimes the victim is threatened, that they will harm the family, or just they don't want to hurt their parents. with that information. They may blame themselves. Amy had a conjunction of Saturn and Pluto, which is one of those very strong aspects for, actually, I was trying to find the natal influences online, and I was finding a very hard time of it. But as I recall, they said something about having like an amazing willpower and amazing ambition. And it's in the sixth house, so that would be very helpful for work matters. But the other thing too is that Saturn can be the father, and Pluto can be the will. She may have gotten this message. I was going to say self-willed, because she might have gotten this message that authority is the power. So whether that was put upon her, especially by the father, and I do think too, Mars is in the fourth house, and that can sometimes indicate domestic violence. I'm actually, there was nothing in the movie to suggest that that was why her parents split up. It was all, when I looked it up, they said her father had cheated, and I certainly don't want to falsely accuse somebody of something, but I know in the movie they were talking about her ex-husband, that he would cut himself, and I don't know if she did as well when she was younger, but I feel like that's another sign of trauma, obviously, when somebody does that. And I've heard that sometimes junkies will cut themselves when they don't have, heroin available, or opiates, whatever they're taking, so that probably to release endorphins. But yeah, so that definitely suggests being troubled on his part. And he was, he had an addiction when he was with her. As a matter of fact, he introduced her to hard drugs. And I want to, I forgot to say this at the beginning, but I was going to set intentions for this reading of the things that I wanted to look at in the chart that might explain her artistic talent and love of music, her appearance, like, what drew her to look the way that she did. I think that is kind of interesting. The why she went into this as a career. And let's see what other things I wanted to, her mental health, those kinds of things. That's what I wanted to kind of see, if I could see, along with any proof of trauma. So looking at that fourth house of home and family, she has Venus here and she has Mars in there in a conjunction. That can sometimes indicate somebody who there was something that was very conflicting, that created conflict in the home environment, but there was also something very positive. She had, close relationships with both of her parents. So, it's kind of a mystery. Why was she such a family person if she had all of this stuff that she was involved with? Well, first of all, her moon was in Capricorn. So she had two planets in the fourth house of home and family, which is the domain of Cancer in astrology, and it's connected to the mother. Specifically, some people say the father. I put the 10th house as the father. So, she had a connection with both of her parents through house placement, as well as the moon in Capricorn, although the moon is considered the way the mother behaves towards the daughter, which would suggest that her mother was very ambitious for her. I'm not really convinced that that's the case. I think her parents appear to be supportive of her, but I never saw any evidence in the movie, which may be whitewashed, that's for sure, of, them pressuring her. Apparently her grandmother was the one that encouraged her to go into the theater. And so she had some background with training with singing when she was younger. I believe she got kicked out of this Saturday theater school when she was 14 after 4 years of going on Saturdays. So why did she even have a love of theater? Well, she had personal planets in Leo. So let's just go down the line here. Her sun was in Virgo. Her moon was at 0 degrees of Capricorn, which means that it was on the cusp of Sagittarius. So that's going to make it a much more fiery moon sign. And again, and I was going to say too, she seemed to have temper issues. And yet when I look at the aspect of the moon to Mars, it's in harmony. It's a trine. So even that doesn't make sense. It might have been specifically in love that she had, because there was no evidence that she was going around hitting people randomly. It was just her partner. And I believe it was under the influence too. So her Venus and Mars were in Leo. As I stated earlier, Virgo is a nondescript sign, and if I had to place it, I would say it's more on the introverted level, although being ruled by Mercury can make such a person talkative and have good communication skills and maybe want to communicate with others. So they may be more inclined to be social than the other two earth signs for that reason alone. Her rising sign, which can indicate her, how she dressed, how she looked, like her body type. I talked about having a thin body type. Also mannerisms. To me, she did give off the nervous energy that we would associate with anyone ruled by Mercury. So in addition to Gemini, Virgo is ruled by Mercury, and of course that is her sun sign. So we could say you can consider your sun sign your ruler as well. So both of those signs are ruled by Mercury. So one thing that jumps out at me when somebody is ruled by Mercury is, and also just about the signs of Gemini and Virgo, is I think of somebody who's high strung. And I think of her as high strung. She seemed that, and again, that's the nervous system. If the nervous system is not regulated, then it's very easy for the person to feel like everything is jangled. If you're in the new agey type of space or community, you may have noticed that there's a lot of talk of nervous system regulation. There are things that you can do for it, and I do recommend that you maybe watch videos on it and learn about those techniques. Some of them might be quite simple, because I can just say for myself, as somebody with the moon in Virgo, is that I had no idea what I was experiencing. And I would always say that my nerves were shot or something like that. And I really didn't think, nervous system. I was just thinking about how it felt inside of my body. And now I know that there are things that you can do to kind of counter that and heal that from that, so that you can really go through life without always being on edge. So she gave off the vibe of being on edge. And with Gemini, it's kind of like that nervous energy where the person constantly feels like they have to move around. And I think that she also was like that, where she couldn't, maybe it was hard for her to sit still. And I think it's easy to get into trouble when you're incapable of, just chilling. I mean, this is what meditation is all about. This is why people do it, so that they can learn to be in a state of serenity on a regular basis. So, yeah, I think that she probably was a very amusing conversationalist, because I was just reading something by her bandmates, and they were saying, she was a warm person. She was funny. That would describe the warmth would describe the Leo influence, and also with the moon being on the cusp of Sagittarius, another fire sign like Leo. And the interesting thing too is that she had a trine between the moon and Venus, and that can be somebody who has an ability to give and receive love. She definitely, I can tell she was a very romantic person. Again, I'm going by the movie, which, they do sensationalize things, or just make them theatrical to move the plot along, I guess. But I do think that she probably had some of those, that I know she did, because I was reading an article from her bandmates. So I'm sure that also applied to her love life. And they said in the movie that she wanted children, and she had the sun and Mercury in the fifth house. The sun rules the fifth house in astrology. Oh, yes. And the sun rules the sign of Leo. So because her sun was there, even though she was a Virgo, she had that Leo sub influence, and that is somebody who is theatrical, a performer, a natural born performer. So I would say that that is front and center of her artistic aspirations, is having the sun and having Mercury here in the fifth. So she was, they said she co-wrote every song from her first album, I guess it was, or maybe, I don't know. Again, I don't know her music, or maybe it was the one where she won the Grammy. Maybe it was Back to Black. I cannot remember, but I'm assuming she wrote melodies too, but she wrote lyrics. So that could be Mercury in the fifth, where it's dealing with creativity that has some kind of written word involved with it. So whether the person is writing poetry, lyrics to songs, plays, maybe even novels, that could be fifth house with Mercury. The sun is the performer, is the self. Okay. But the thing that is interesting, and the movie alluded to this with the paparazzi, is that she seemed like that was very oppressive for her. And I was reading an article that I think she got like some kind of an injunction for them to, to try to stop them from, coming to her. And yeah, so I think the reason for this is because just about all of her planets are in the first six houses. So the bottom half of the chart are the personal houses, the first through the sixth houses, and then the seventh through the 12th houses are considered the public arena, which honestly doesn't make sense to me, because, for instance, the 8th house and the 12th houses, they seem like aspects of our psyche and our soul. So I don't see those as very outward houses, but maybe because they involve other people, and maybe the first six houses involve the individual And so I think that she may have been very pretty much an introvert until maybe she was performing, and then she could, put on a good show, but she was not somebody who really wanted to be in the public eye. And so, yes, I do believe fame can destroy people because they're just not well equipped to handle it. I don't know why anybody wants to be famous. I don't think they do. I think they like the idea of it until they actually experience it. But anyway, so I think that contributed to her issues. In terms of addiction, I wanted to say, like, what could make a person addictive? Well, first of all, okay, looking at her sixth house, which had a stellium in it, and by the way, is the house that Virgo rules in astrology, so it was very important because her sun is in Virgo, is that she had that Saturn-Pluto conjunction there, and she also had Uranus and Jupiter here. I think Uranus and Jupiter, and they were in conjunction. Now remember that Uranus is, both of these planets are outer planets. Uranus is more of a generational planet, although it is not in the same league as Neptune or Pluto. It has kind of like half of that transit, like, so you could say about 7 years through a sign, but that's a long time. So I don't know, like, I'm sure that people around 1983, that a lot of them, I don't know, like, what period of time. It would probably only be like that year, that it'd probably be not that long because Jupiter only has a year-long cycle. So when there's that conjunction between Jupiter and Uranus, okay, there in the sixth house, I can see someone. The sixth and the 10th houses are not interchangeable, but in certain cases, I can look to the sixth house and see what we could assume was career related. And it's almost like we would say going viral. Now, I can't remember exactly. She was born in 1983, and her first album, I believe, came out in 2003. I think that, well, I looked it up, and her Back to Black album was considered her breakthrough album, but she did sell quite a bit in Europe with her first album in 2003, Frank. The reason I'm bringing this up is because YouTube did not exist until 2005. Was it 2005? Not 2004. I think it's definitely 2005. So, I mean, there was a video sharing through Google before then, but I would say that, it's most likely that the internet helped her to gain traction. I don't know that that's the case. The reason I'm even bringing this up is because Uranus is connected to technology, and Jupiter can be that lucky break. But, you can just say Uranus is this out of the blue kind of situation that is unexpected, and Jupiter. So we could just say that there's, what you want to call it, serendipity, something unexpected that just makes it so that she, has like luck in her career. And really, her bandmate said that she really Amy said that she would have been involved with music regardless. It wasn't about being famous that put her in that place. So what you can deduce from that is that she had a great love of it, which you can tell by somebody who has the sun in the fifth house. She just loved creating. She was born to be a creator. Being a creator has nothing to do with the results of your creation. Nothing. You can, be very prolific and be completely obscure. Nobody knows who you are. So one is not connected to the other. But because, she has Jupiter in conjunction with Uranus in the sixth house, that could have been a lucky break for her that led to future opportunities arising for her. So, yeah, very interesting. In terms of mental health and addictive tendencies, I wanted to call attention to some aspects to Neptune. In the first place, she had a square between the Sun and Neptune, and this can lead to identity issues. It's a very interesting thing. I'm just going to talk about her moon being in conjunction with Neptune and her Mercury being square Neptune, because I think these are all related. So when you have the moon in conjunction with Neptune, it's like having the moon in Pisces. And one of her bandmates said that she was intuitive. And I could, just based on the movie, I could tell. I was prepared for her to have the moon in Pisces, but it's interesting that I even thought that, because this is like having the moon in Pisces when you have the moon in conjunction with Neptune. Is a conjunction a hard angle? Or is it a friendly angle, or is it neutral? When it comes to conjunctions, it can be any of the above. It depends on what two planets are joining up, linking up. I think that the moon, when it's in conjunction with Neptune, is more of a hard angle, to be honest with you. It's more challenging. And the reason is because our emotional nature is already coming from a place that is not based in logic. Our emotions are based on our past experiences, maybe our past life influences that are still kind of maybe from an unconscious level still kind of running the show sometimes, and that lead to these typical reactions. It's very reactionary. So in this particular case, it's like, what stimulates the person's emotions? Well, it's Neptunian, it's Piscean. That means that the person can be easily moved by other people's suffering. And they can have a spiritual component for sure, because it can make the person highly empathic, highly sensitive to pain, emotional pain, and therefore very receptive towards people who have pain, because this person is a natural healer. And one of the quotes that they used at the beginning and at the end of the movie was, I just want, to be something where people can forget their troubles for a little while. I forgot the extent of the quote, but something like that. Now, that implies that, she wants to be a healer. She wants to heal people, or at least be some sort of temporary distraction from this pain that she is really kind of seeing life as producing. And so a person like this is naturally super sensitive. The problem is that they can be sensitive to other people's pain, and that's what an empath is, but it could make them fall in love with the wrong person. For instance, she was so in love with this man who became her husband for a brief period of time, named Blake, that she you know, fell head over heels in love with him, even though he was using hard drugs. Not to say that that makes him unlovable, but Neptune is connected to drugs. She has Neptune in the 7th house of committed partnership, which can indicate getting involved with somebody who is deceptive or chemically addicted. Sometimes those things go together very nicely, where a person is deceptive and they're a drug addict or an alcoholic. It can definitely mean that such a person is highly intuitive or psychic, but that can have a rather disorienting effect to have this kind of conjunction, or even like the hard angles as well, because they can also indicate that. But the conjunction can mean that the person may not be in touch with reality, I feel, sometimes. I'm not saying that this is true across the board or even for her, but I do feel that there is a love of fantasy and escapism. And with the emotions being so sensitive, the person may be prone to escape. Now, interestingly, her moon is in Capricorn. So this is the perfect example of somebody whose sun and moon is in Earth, and yet they, the person does not come across as an earth sign in many, many ways, because they have, such a strong influence in other areas of the astrological chart. By the way, her sun and moon form a square, even though they are both in Earth, which is supposed to form a trine, but this is an out of sign square. And this again is based on the degrees of, for instance, like I said, Capricorn moon at 0 degrees of Capricorn, and then you have the sun at 21 degrees of Virgo. You think of a late degree Sagittarius moon, and that would form a square with the sun. And I think being out of sign also makes it a little bit more disjointed. Square between the sun and moon can be conflicts between the head and the heart, I would say, and the heart being the moon and the emotional nature. So there's some kind of the person's ambitions may not align with the emotional side of things. And for somebody who wishes to be a performer, or maybe like I'm sure there was a part of her that wanted to go on stage. So I'm not saying that she did not want to do that at all. But perhaps she did not want to be a star. Maybe she wanted to be a performer and not have the kind of scrutiny at that high level of being in front of massive crowds of people. That might have been too overwhelming for her. And so it increased the drive to kind of numb out, if you will. But in terms of other aspects of this, I feel like she may have been also the kind of person, they even said, she said, I want to be a mother and your wife. Again, this was dialogue in the movie, which could have been completely manufactured, but I do feel that they got it from probably interviewing people in her life about what she was really wanting for herself. So the moon is the nurturing side, the domestic side. Yes, in Capricorn, it can be very ambitious. So there, even within its own sign, there is conflict. So I'm definitely seeing it from all ends here. It's important to note too that with the moon in conjunction with Neptune, it is very easy for somebody with this aspect to lie to themselves. You can talk about the deluded quality, and that's lying to oneself, but also believing lies from others. My feeling, and based on experience with this, that I think I can speak on. Not sure. I just can really understand the dynamic that goes on with people who have the moon in Pisces, or having that conjunction between the moon and Neptune, is that if somebody, like let's say a friend or family member, points out to such a person, look, your partner is using you for your money, your partner is cheating on you, they will attack you. The person with this conjunction, they will attack you, even though you're just a messenger. They will attack you, and they will defend that person. They will double down on defending that person. Okay, this is that deluded quality. Why? That has been something that I have always searched the answer for, because if somebody is trying to tell you, look, I saw your man or your husband going out last night and he was with another woman, and then like, you're lying, you're just jealous, you just wish you could have him, and blah blah blah, those kinds of things, yeah, that could definitely happen. Now, why would somebody do that? Why wouldn't they just know that their friend, why wouldn't they trust their friend to give them that advice? My theory is because they want to believe the fantasy. They have created this false reality for themselves. They're living in a fantasy world. So that's why they're doing that. And if somebody tries to, break up their fantasy, there's going to be hell to pay, because they, that's what they live for, is their fantasy. She also had a square between Mercury and Neptune. This can indicate, now this can also relate to learning disabilities. So somebody with dyslexia, somebody with dyscalculia, or whatever heck you pronounce it, that has to do with, calculating math. Somebody who distorts information. Now, they're not like, this is not some kind of a communist plot. They're not trying to do it. It just so happens that they hear what they want to hear, just like you see what you want to see. The reason is because I believe it is a coping mechanism, or something they have adopted from, maybe, I'm assuming, their family of origin, in order to get them through certain situations, so they didn't have to face something that was very, very upsetting to them. And they could kind of like, again, live in that fantasy. So it's really, putting on the rose-colored glasses, hearing what they want to hear, creating an alternative narrative to what is going on. That, to me, is also addictive behavior, because people, to me, one of the driving forces, and they dramatized this in the movie, was when something was upsetting, she would reach for a drink. And with the sun in the fifth house can be the house of pleasure. It's actually one of the houses that is connected to addiction. And if you think about pleasure and you think about addiction, the two go hand in hand. People just craving a certain sensation. And so that maybe, but remember, she has a square between the Sun and Neptune. So perhaps this feeling like, oh, if I can't define myself, then I'm going to totally, kind of obliterate myself from being this entity that is, an individual, Neptune relates to the collective soul. And you would see the fifth house, well, the sun is the individual, but I'm saying the fifth house can be connected to the self in a creative mode. Now, this square between the fifth and the seventh, though, can be about love and commitment. She may have felt like commitment was elusive because the person that, she was really hung up on was her ex-husband, Blake, and he went back to his wife. So he was like back and forth and with his wife. And she might have felt negative emotions because of that, what was going on there. I'm going to end this reading by mentioning something about that Venus-Mars conjunction in the fourth as it pertains to her death, to Amy's death, that may be completely erroneous, but I'm going to say it anyway. The fourth house is the beginning of life, and it also represents the end of life. Now, you definitely should look at the eighth house in terms of death and see what's going on there. Now, we're not talking about transits. We're talking about, which is important too, but I'm talking about natally what's going on, to see like how the person dies. Do they have something that is very, like Mars in the eighth house can be a violent death. John F. Kennedy was assassinated, and he had Mars in the eighth house. Doesn't mean everybody with Mars in the eighth house is going to be murdered, but or meet with a violent death. Just showing an example of how that can play out. But guess what? Amy had Mars in the fourth house, and that is supposed to be end of life. Now, why am I saying this? I've been looking to see if I can find anything on the conspiracies, because I did read it somewhere, but with the censorship that we have nowadays, you have to really dig. And I just saw the movie yesterday, so give me some time. I'm sure I'll ferret it out. But without remembering what they said in that particular article, I believe, and I have read, that sometimes famous people are murdered because their catalog, their musical catalog will increase if they die. Maybe maybe the artist is in a bad shape. Like, for instance, Amy, she had done a concert where she couldn't even perform. I don't remember if that was the last year of her life, however. I can't remember what year that was, but she was really far gone. She had gone through rehab, and, they say she had relapsed, or that, she was not clean anymore, or whatever. They were saying that she was drinking again. I don't know about that, but she definitely had been troubled, extremely troubled. But there have been other artists, whether you're talking about Michael Jackson, Tom Petty, Prince, all of these people. And some of those coincidentally had trouble with their record labels. They were fighting their record labels. At least at one point in their career. Like, they did not have this harmonious relationship with the company that was putting out their records. So anyway, in other words, sometimes artists are worth more dead than alive to those who are putting out their music. Or they think that the controversy, the death, will increase record sales, which it does. It does. I just saw this recently. I can't remember who it was, but it was like all of a sudden their songs are number one or their records are number one. And this includes their old material. You know what I mean? So apparently, Amy Winehouse did not have an extensive discography. She came out with 2 albums that I know of. She might have come out with some live stuff, but 2 studio albums, one in 2003 and one in 2007, I believe. So if she died in 2011 and she had 2 albums total, she was not the most prolific artist. And based on her past troubles, people might have seen the writing on the wall and said, no, this person is probably going to die young. And so, they're not going to be very productive in putting out a lot of content. So, we're going to have to just make a profit off of what we have currently. And because of that, and of course, I'm not saying that she was murdered, and there might have been another reason why she was murdered, but I find it very interesting that Venus and Mars are in conjunction in that 4th house. So that person, so Venus can be money. So that person might be murdered for money in their own home. And of course, they can make it look like anything. They can make it look like she went back on the bottle. And she had, I just find it, they said she was on Librium, which I believe is a tranquilizer, that it was to keep her from drinking. And I do believe that sometimes when people die, if they're drinking, it's because they're taking something else. But in and of itself, I've never heard of alcohol poisoning causing death, unless you're in a hazing incident where you're consuming insane amounts and you're that young that you don't know any better. You don't know how dangerous it is to consume so much alcohol in a short period of time. That, yes, I'm sure that happens. But usually it's probably an interaction with some other drug. So I'm just putting that out there at the end, whether that had anything to do with end of life issues. She has no plants in the 8th house. And so, and that actually surprised me because, we pretty much obsess about her death. Her, by the way, a member of the 27 Club, like Brian Jones, Jim Morrison, among other people. And an interesting thing about that is that Jim Morrison had Neptune in his 8th house. And his death has always been considered a mystery. Neptune can be confusion, murky circumstances, deception. And like I said, the 8th house is the house that we, the premier house that we look to when we look to death in the individual. But the 4th house can be end of life. One more thing that I want to mention too is that she had a square between the sun and ascendant, as well as Mercury and ascendant. When you have a square between the sun and ascendant, there can be a way that you are that is at odds with how you behave. And you feel frustrated about this. With the opposition, I would say more of a contradictory nature, that maybe you go from one extreme to the other and you haven't yet integrated both sides of yourself. But with the square, it's like you want to be able to shine your light so that people can see it, but for some reason it's obscured. And I would say, she's got it with these 2 Mercury ruled signs Virgo and Gemini. So I don't see much difference between them on the surface, except that one is air and one is earth. And it is possible that, and based on the fact that she has a moon in Capricorn as well, I feel like she might have sensed that she was not taken seriously as somebody who had common sense, and she probably did. I have a feeling that she did. She may have had a side of her that was self-destructive that tended to not only obscure that, but also create circumstances in her life that would make it less likely for her to be stable, like you associate with Earth. With Mercury squaring the ascendant, it can mean that the way that the person communicates does a disservice to their image. Again, image, is it really important, or is it just superficial? I think it's, the way that we carry ourselves. So I don't think it's the ultimate, but I also think that it can create a bit of a handicap for somebody if they have the tendency to kind of do things that cause people to misunderstand them. And I think that's what the square can definitely do. So I know she had a very foul mouth. So that might have been where, and based on the accent in the movie, I am assuming that she was more of a working class background. They showed her father was a taxi driver, and I saw on Wikipedia he did something else, but I don't think that he had, I think he had more of like what we would call a blue collar job in the United States. And I can't remember what her mother did, but I mean, not to say that they didn't have a comfortable life, but it seemed like they were more perhaps coming from or she came from a working class environment. And then on top of that, the way that she looked, the tattoos, the excessive swearing, that it might have come across as rather uncouth. Being a Virgo, that kind of thing is, not something that a Virgo person typically goes for. Virgo people, not the same as Libra, the adjacent sign. We're not talking about necessarily being polite, but that coarseness, I feel, is something that a Virgo person doesn't really want. Or, actually, it would be more about the etiquette or the politeness coming from Virgo, versus with Libra, it's more about being rough around the edges, uncouth. So, so that's an interesting thing to see as well. Okay, well, I'm going to stop there. I hope that this was interesting, if anybody has stayed through almost an hour. And if you'd like a personal reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.